good afternoon to all. I take immense pleasure in welcoming all the students for this exclusive webinar on creating amazing characters in the stories. Now, Flame Upskill's primary goal is to assist high school students in developing critical skills for their learning and growth. In this series, you will explore areas outside of your courses, which will help you build your profiles for higher education. And just please note all the students, the attendees who complete the entire session will be given a letter of participation, and you will receive the letter by Wednesday, 24th August. So today's session will be taken by Professor Michael Burns. Professor Michael Burns completed his Ph.D. in documentary films history from the University of Birmingham in the UK, becoming the first student in the United Kingdom to submit an audiovisual doctorate. Since then, Professor Burns has completed 5 documentary films for international television, and his work has appeared in over 20 countries. In recent years, Professor Burns developed a strong interest in story structure and traditions of storytelling. He has published 2 books derived from the storytelling work. He also teaches the most popular creative writing workshop in India under the Tall Tales umbrella. It's an honor to have you amongst us, sir. I'm sure that the students will feel enriched with knowledge by the end of this session. Over to you, Professor Burns.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Maybe we can just in the chat, can you just give me some indication that you can hear me? Okay, amazing, awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so today's session is about, it's kind of under the domain of storytelling. So story writing is just one type of writing. There are many, many different types of writing. There's stream of consciousness, there's essay writing, there's poetry writing, experimental writing, informal writing, blog writing, so many different types of writing. But many of us, and I say us because I include myself also, are very interested in story writing. So one of the things, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we go on today, one of the things that is essential, not just important, but essential in story writing, story creating, story designing, is a great character. Okay, maybe sometimes even more than one character, but we need at least one character in every story. So today's session is about how do you create a character that is not just interesting, but is inspiring. You know, I know some characters have changed my life, you know. Or what is it when an author is creating a character, when an author is, you know, brainstorming about how to build a character? What are the types of things that they're thinking about? And what are they thinking about in terms of something that's going to stick with you for the rest of your life? Right? There is actually a process to this. There is a plan that a good author will make when it comes to designing a character. So today we're going to talk about that. How can you, in your story writing, also design unforgettable characters? Okay. So I hope that all of you, because this session, even though we have 218 at the moment participants here, maybe we'll have a few more as we go on. Even though you're all listening to what I'm having to say, I want this to be as participatory as possible. So definitely you should be taking notes if you're a writer yourself or you're interested in improving your storytelling. And of course, if you also want to get recognition from Flame that you've completed this workshop. But also I would love for you to share some responses and thoughts with me when I ask for them. And I'm going to ask for one of them right now, which is, what do you think goes into a great character? Today, I'm going to give you some of my insights that I've learned over the last 20 years of doing this type of work, of what makes a great character. But I want to know from you, what do you think makes a good character in a written story? Conflict, personality, being well written, dialogues, origin, development, individuality. I see a lot of, yes, some thoughts, personality, behavior. Great. Realistic, uniqueness, character traits, Personality, creativity, character arc, jokes. Okay, I like that. Some important things there. Some important things. So let's unpack this a little bit together. Okay. So one thing that I'm glad that nobody mentioned there, that a lot of young writers, and you qualify as a young writer at the kind of towards the beginning of your writing journey, a lot of young writers will say one of the things that makes an important character is their appearance. What they look like and what they wear and stuff like that. And one of the things I want to tell you today is that this is not important at all. Okay. I shouldn't say at all, but it's almost 0% in terms of importance. What the character looks like is often given importance when you hear something geared towards young writers, because it's a very superficial thing, and people who are giving advice think it's something that you can imagine, and it's easy for you to put in your head and put down on your notes. But the truth is that now you're getting older and you're getting more sophisticated, and your writing is also getting more sophisticated. It's really important that you also recognize that what a character looks like is not very important. And what's really cool about this is that this also works for real life too. What a person actually looks like, what a person wears, really not very important. Of course, we know it's what the person is like inside that matters. Same thing is true for storytelling. So when I'm working with some students and I ask them to create a character, sometimes they'll create only those superficial details. We want to put those aside and recognize that that's just like in real life, that's not that important. Okay, so what is important? And we're going to get into that now. I'm going to talk with you about how to build a character. And we're going to learn this by doing a series of exercises, writing exercises together. Okay, you're going to be doing them. And after we finish these writing exercises, I'm going to explain to you why we did that writing exercise and what detail that exercise helped us to notice when it comes to what makes a great character. So if you feel a little bit lost, don't worry. At the end of the session today, I'm going to connect all the dots for you so that you can very clearly see on your notes what goes into an amazing character in a piece of writing, okay, in a story. Final thing I want to mention in terms of busting these myths, the myth about what somebody looks like being important, being one of them. Another one is sometimes if you read something about how to create a great character in your writing, or you go on YouTube and you watch something, you might see somebody say that you should be creating 3-dimensional characters. It's very important that you have 3-dimensional characters. But very often the facilitator or the teacher doesn't stop and explain, what does that mean, 3-dimensional characters? Yes, it sounds like a very nice thing. Of course, we want everything in 3D, but what are the 3 dimensions? And this is important because it helps us to recognize this third dimension is something that we're really going to put under the microscope today. Okay. The first dimension of a character is who they are. So like, for example, maybe it's a fireman or a house cleaner or a dog, who is this character, right? That's the first dimension. Second dimension is, how do they behave? This person acts like this animal acts like this. Maybe your character is a ghost, and this ghost behaves like this. 2 dimensions. But now the third dimension, which is the most important dimension, which is why. Why does this character behave that way? And now we're starting to get into what makes something a story rather than just a description. If we stay in those first 2 dimensions, who this character is and how they act, we're actually just describing something. We're not doing any type of storytelling. We haven't even opened the door to storytelling yet. When we start to get into something called motivation, which is why you do what you do, why this character does what they do, then now we've entered the world of storytelling. We can begin to tell a story about how that stuff came to be. how those behaviors came to be ingrained or repeated or whatever they are. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of end the beginning with that, which is this three-dimensional characters, very, very important, who they are, how they behave, but we can't forget about the most important one of all, the third dimension, which is why do they behave the way they do? Okay, if we don't tackle that, we don't have a story at all. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go through. Okay, so let's go to our first activity. And again, just for anybody who might have joined a few minutes late or something like that, our activities are going to help us later on, maybe about 45 minutes from now, understand what I call the universal character attributes, the 6 most important things when it comes to designing an amazing character. Okay, so while we're doing those exercises, bear with us as we go through them. We'll learn something and then we'll connect the dots at the end. Okay. So right now, all of you on the paper in front of you, I hope you have something to write with. I hope everybody has something to write with because it's essential for this workshop. And you're going to be submitting this material at the end in order to be to get recognition from Flame. I want you to imagine a character, okay? And when I say a character, like, and literally just one word. So maybe scuba diver, or maybe your character is a kitten. Maybe your character is an eagle. Maybe your character is a government official. So just something like that. I want you to write that down, okay? Nice and simple, just like that. You know, my character is an author. My character is an astronaut, okay? Everybody have that? Now I want you to imagine, what does this character want? What does this character want? Okay, any character that you want. Somebody asked if you could be a cricketer. Of course it can, because it's any character that you could possibly come up with. And now, what does this character want? It's up for you to decide, okay? Has to be something important, right? It shouldn't be like if it's a teacher, you know, she wants a cup of coffee, right? Not so important. It has to be something really important. What does this character want? If it's a cricketer, maybe he wants to win the World Cup, right? So give them a goal that's pretty big, something that's exciting. Okay, everybody have that? A character and something that they want. Hope everybody has that. Great. You can share here or you can just keep to yourself because there's more to this exercise, okay? So I want you to kind of put that aside for a second, okay? We're going to come back to that later. Now, let's focus on something new. I want you to imagine that there is a hole in the ground, okay? A hole in the ground. And there is a character who has been given, this is a different character, by the way, okay? This is just a person. This person has been given instructions to fill this hole. They must fill this hole, okay? With dirt or with whatever they can find around them. They must fill this hole. I want you to imagine, what will this person who has a limited amount of time, what will they use to fill this hole? Okay? They have to get the hole filled. It seems like an easy job, but they have a very small amount of time to do it. So they're going to use anything that they can find, literally anything. I want you to imagine somebody scrambling around, finding as many possible things as they can to fill this hole with. And I want you just to write a few sentences about that. He does this, he does this, he does this. What is he going to do? In other words, what extent is he going to go to fill this hole? It must be filled in a very short amount of time. What is he going to do to fill it? There's not enough time to fill it with dirt. That would take all day. He's only got 30 minutes. It's a very deep hole in the ground, needs to be filled. Imagine, you have to use your imagination. What is he going to do? Maybe you need to give him an ability to move very quickly. Well, that's something that you can decide on your own. Okay, so there's no need to share it in the chat. This is for your notebook, for your work that we're working on. Right now, we're working on one of the universal character attributes. So for anybody that joined late, we have a character that that wants something, and we put that aside for a second. And now we're focusing on this image of somebody doing whatever they can to quickly fill a hole in the ground that's been dug. They're trying to fill it desperately with anything that they can. Yes, Praket, that's exactly what we're asking. How is a person going to fill this hole? And then after we do this, we're going to come back to the character that you created. Right now, the goal for this exercise right now is, how are we going to fill this hole? How is she going to fill this hole? How is he going to do it? All right, so take a minute to write some notes down about how this is going to be filled. People are asking questions, nice questions, but don't overthink it. It's just a hole in the ground that needs to be filled. We're not really talking about what this represents or anything like that. We're just imagining there's a hole, very short amount of time to fill it, and what is our character going to do to fill it? Okay, so I hope everybody has written that piece down. What did you notice? If you look closely at what you wrote, you notice that this character is facing a kind of a challenge here, right? And the challenge is you're being given a task that is impossible normally to do, okay? If you had all day to fill a very deep hole, you could probably do it with just dirt. But if you have a very short amount of time to fill a hole, you just have to use whatever you can around you, including maybe things that you normally wouldn't use, trying desperately to fill this hole, right? So what does this teach us? It teaches us that sometimes a character, in order to get what they want, will have to do unusual or even outrageous things in order to accomplish it, in order to accomplish their goal. All right? So now what I want you to do is I want you to look back at that character that you created. So maybe you wrote, I have an astronaut that wants to go to Jupiter. Okay, great. Now, I want you to imagine that whatever challenge you have given your character, this is going to be very difficult for them to do. And they don't have a long time to do it. I want you to now ask yourself, how is this character going to make that thing happen? And hard work and effort is not going to cut it. This goal that they have is so big, so substantial, so difficult that it's going to take more than just hard work. In other words, to what extent is this character willing to go to make that thing happen? Maybe something is going to have to be sacrificed. Maybe time is going to have to be cut from something else in order to do it. What is going to be ignored? Maybe their health has to be ignored in order for them to pursue this. So I want you to imagine, what level is this character going to push herself in order to get this thing? That's your task, to write 4 or 5 sentences related to that. The goal you set for your character is very substantial. It's not easy to get this goal. Sometimes in order to get a goal, something else must be pushed to the side, deprioritizing other things in order to prioritize something else. What is going to be pushed aside? How is she going to do it? Just like we talked about with filling the hole, sometimes with desperation comes even not only creativity, but also innovative ways to obtain the prize that you're after. Okay, so this is what I want you to think about. And I want you to write 4 or 5 sentences that explores this idea of what level, what extent is this character going to go to in order to get that thing? Yes, Namrata, really, we're really not even talking about the ideas of good and bad. We're just saying, like, for example, to fill a hole, maybe you have to steal something from a neighbor's house or something. We're kind of putting morality aside for the moment, just because this is a mental exercise. Whenever we're thinking about writing, we can do that in our imaginations, because it's not the real world. And we're going to talk about all of these moral decisions and things like that at the end when we finish. Okay, so take 1 more minute to do that, and then we're going to move on to the next one. And again, at the end, I will tell you why we did this and how you can use these techniques to build your own characters. Great, thanks, Pragya. No need to share it here unless you want to, but it's more for your notes for yourself. Okay, the next one, Arav, we can't spend too much time on any one of them because there's 6 of them that we're going to go through. So we already spent 10 minutes on this one, so we have to move on to the next one. The next one is a little bit simpler, okay? I want you to imagine, this is from your real life, by the way. This is not some character or something like this. I want you to ask yourself, what is one dream that I have for myself? So not something I want, like, I would like a new computer or something like that. Yeah, that's something you want. But what's something you dream about? Meaning, like, if you got this thing or if you experience this thing, it would be a fulfillment for you on a deep level. That's what it means to have a dream, okay? A dream is like something that I only hope will happen to me, or I only hope I will obtain. So what's a dream that you have? I want you to really think about this. What's it deep down inside? What is a dream that you have? Could be for yourself, can be for those around you. A good dream involves you in some way, but also affects other people, kind of a selfless dream. I want you to write that down on your notebook, okay? This one is a little bit easier than the last one. Last one was about a character. What are they willing to do to get this thing? This one is a little bit simpler. This is, what is one of your dreams personally for you that you have about the future? Just take a few minutes to work on that. Okay. Okay, Robin. Yes, we've said this a few times, but I'll say it again. We're just very, very simple. What is a dream that you have for your own future? What is something you would like to see happen in your life or obtain in your life? It's not something you want, right? There's a big difference between something I want, which is a small desire, and something you dream about, which is something much bigger. One thing. So somebody wrote something, I didn't quite understand it, but that's okay. It's up for you to interpret however you want. We'll talk about why this is important. Try to be specific, Ashita. A good world to live in is not specific enough, because what might be good to you might not be good to somebody else. For example, some people want to be rich, but we all know that when somebody has a lot of something, that requires other people to have very little of it, right? So what might be good for one person might not be so good for everyone. So the word good is a little bit too vague in that sense, all right? So let's be specific about what our dream might be. Okay, so I hope everybody has that. Remember, this is for your notes, and we're going to go through exactly why this is important later. Okay, here this one is a little bit more challenging. I tried to kind of intersperse the more challenging ones in here. Okay, now I want you now. Remember that character that we talked about before? That's temporarily gone. So like each one of these is their own separate exercise. Okay, I want you to think of 3 talents. Talent, T-A-L-E-N-T-S, talents. 3 talents that you do not have. 3 talents that you do not have. And I want you to write those down. I do not have these talents. Okay? 3 talents that you do not have. I want you to write them down on the paper in front of you. No, we don't really think of confidence as a talent, but you can. I mean, that's part of the fun of storytelling, is that you can kind of make up your own universe. So maybe in your universe, confidence is a talent. Perfectly fine. A talent is usually an action rather than a description of something. So like, so maybe perhaps you might be thinking, I'm not a very good public speaker or something like this. Like, so that would be a talent that you don't have, perhaps. Trying to make it into an action, you know. I don't have the talent for ice skating, personally. Everybody have 3 things? It's really important that you have 3 in order for this exercise to work, okay? I hope everybody has 3 things. So now, I want you to imagine that you are meeting the creator of the universe, okay? Whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God, or maybe there's a supercomputer that has created everything, I don't know, but it's an all-knowing force, okay? You are having a conversation with this all-knowing force that knows everything about you and everything about the universe, okay? And this all-knowing force is going to tell you that actually you have these 3 talents that you've just written down. It is untrue that you do not have these talents. You have these talents. Now, I want you to ask yourself, how is it possible that you've come to the conclusion that you don't have these talents when actually you do? So I'm not saying this is happening for real. I'm saying you have to use your imagination. You've written down 3 things. I'm not talented at this. I'm not talented at this. I'm not talented at this. I'm saying imagine somebody tells you, somebody who knows the absolute truth, that in fact you do have those talents. How can this have happened? How can you have perceived that you don't have those talents when actually you do? Tell me the background. Write it down. How have you come to such an incorrect conclusion about your own self? Okay, I want you to write these down in your notes. You're wrong that you don't have those 3 talents. You, in fact, do have them. How did this happen? Is it possible for somebody to have a talent at something but not realize it? Tell me about that. Explain that. How is that possible? I think it is possible, actually, but I want to know what you think. How is that possible? Okay, so write that down. How has this come about? I hope everybody's following along so far. So I'll just do a quick recap in case anybody came late. The first exercise that we did, we imagined that there was somebody filling up a hole, okay? And they had to do everything they could to fill up this hole very, very quickly. They didn't have enough time. What kind of decisions are they going to make in their desperation to fill up this hole? And we took that same kind of feeling of desperation and we transferred it to a character that you made up. You made up a character, maybe you made up a dog, and this dog really wanted something desperately. It wanted the special magic bone that's kept at the top of this Mount Everest, okay? And the dog doesn't have enough time to climb up the mountain. What is it going to do in its desperation to get this thing? Just like the person that was trying to fill up the hole, what are they going to do to make this thing happen? Are they going to have to sacrifice something? Are they going to have to do something that they normally wouldn't do? That was the first exercise. Second exercise was much easier. This was like, what is one thing that you dream about for your own life, for the future? Something that you would like to be a part of, something that you would like to see, something you would like to experience, something that you would like to gain. What's a dream of yours? And then the third one here is, I want you to write down 3 talents that you do not have. You absolutely do not have these talents. You're sure of it. You're completely sure. And then I want you to imagine that you are meeting with an all-knowing force. We can call it God if you believe in God, or we can call it something else. Something that some force that knows you inside and out completely. And she's going to tell you, believe it or not, you actually have the talent for these 3 things. You just don't realize it. How has this happened? Is that possible for you to have a talent for something but not realize it? In your own life, explore it. How has this come about? Okay. We're going to unpack that after we finish all 6 of these pieces, okay? Now we're going to move on to the 4th one. The 4th one is this. I'm going to give you an example because this one's a little bit challenging. I want you to imagine 2 laws or social rules, okay? So a legal rule is something we call a law, but a social rule is not the level of law, but it's still a rule. I'll give you an example. Like, you should, before you start eating, you should wash your hands. Okay, so this is like a social rule. A law might be, you cannot steal from somebody else. Okay, so I want you to imagine 2 of these. They can be 2 social rules. They can be 2 laws. They can be 1 social rule and 1 law. I want you to come up with a list of 2 things, 2 rules. One of them a law, one of them a social rule. Both of them can be laws. You shouldn't do this thing. You should always do this thing instead, something like that. 2 rules, okay? I'm going to give you an example with this one because this is a little bit tricky. One of the rules I'm going to write down is that you should never steal anything from anyone. Okay, that's one of the rules. Everybody have two of them? Two social rules or legal rules. Another word for a legal rule is a law. So a social rule might be like, it's a nice thing to take your shoes off before you enter somebody's home. It's a sanitary thing to do. This is a social rule, right? A law might be you shouldn't drive over this speed limit on the highway because that's breaking a law. Okay? Does that make sense to everyone? Two rules, either social or legal. Now, I want you to ask yourself, are there any situations, can you imagine any situations where it will be okay to break these rules? Look at the first rule and think to yourself, is there any situation, and you might be thinking, okay, now we're getting into bad things or something like that. And we're not talking about really breaking the law. We're talking about using our imaginations to consider, is there a situation where you ever might need to or want to break this rule for a good reason? I'll give you an example. Let's take the one that I just gave about driving so fast, okay? It is on, I live in Pune, and if I want to go to Bombay, I know that the speed limit is 85 kilometers per hour. Can't go above 85 kilometers per hour. That's my rule. That's my legal rule, otherwise known as a law. Can think of a situation where it would be a good thing to break that rule? Sure, I can. Imagine if I'm with a pregnant woman who's trying to get to a hospital as desperately as she can because she's about to have a baby. This situation is actually okay to go beyond the speed limit. It's the right thing to do to go beyond the speed limit. Okay? So that's what I'm talking about here. Can you imagine a situation where it might be okay to break the rule? Stealing something from a store, not a good thing to do, right? Imagine if you were in a family and the family was suffering, the family was starving. Might it be okay to take something? Maybe. As a mental experiment, maybe. And you could pay that person back later, something like that. Maybe you can ask for, maybe the store does not offer credit of any kind, but if you tell them that you're going to starve without it, maybe they're willing to offer you credit, something like that. A rule, and in a situation where it would be okay to break that rule. That's what I want you to experiment on this fourth one. I think the important thing to remember about this one is that we are not breaking the rule in order to hurt someone. We're breaking the rule in order to do more good. I know that sometimes it's hard to understand that, but we're not breaking the rule out of a malice or an anger towards somebody else. We're trying to think of situations where it's okay to break the rule because we're doing it for the greater good, just like taking the very pregnant woman to the hospital. We're doing a good thing for her that happens to involve breaking a rule. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? I hope it does. Just give you 1 minute to finish up those thoughts in your writing. Okay, great. I hope everybody has explored that, and we're gonna connect those dots a little bit later. The fifth one is a really fun one. Okay, I want you to look around where you are right now. Some of you are sitting in a classroom somewhere. Some of you might be sitting at home. Some of you might be in an office, depending on where you are. I want you to look around and find a normal everyday object. Okay, a normal everyday object. I have a roll of double-sided tape here in my hand. Maybe you have something, a cup, or maybe you have a mug, or maybe you have a piece of paper. Just look for something other than the pen in your hand or the laptop in front of you. Look for something that you can hold in your hand. I also have a little tape dispenser here, so I could choose that. I want you just to imagine, okay, here's something that I have near me. If you're sitting at a desk with nothing but your pen and paper, maybe you have a wallet in your pocket or a handkerchief. Don't pick a cell phone. Don't pick a mobile phone. And I'll tell you why, because I always advise all of my students and the clients that I write books with and things like that, don't write about the phone. We spend so much of our time every day dealing with our phones. Nobody wants to also read about phones when it's their spare time. As useful as the phone is, it's incredibly boring to read about. So let's not get in a habit of writing about it, okay? Something besides your mobile. Even the clothes you're wearing are far more interesting than your mobile. Okay, everybody have one thing? Now, I want you to imagine a character, so not you, Imagine a different person, okay? And this person, every time they see that object, every time this character sees this tape dispenser, they get a chill right down their spine. They're scared of this thing. And it's not because they're scared that the tape is going to, come out and wrap around them and kill them or something like that. There's been something that happened in the past that was related in some way to this tape. And when they see this tape dispenser, it reminds them of this thing that happened. So this is your opportunity to connect those. I want you to take the object that you chose, whatever object it was, and come up with a story. And by story, I mean kind of a backstory of something that happened in the past that leads a character to feel scared when he or she looks at this object. Now, with this tape dispenser, if you notice, it happens to be this bright color of neon pink. Maybe one time when I was going on vacation in Thailand, I ended up losing my wallet outside of this one restaurant that had a pink neon sign. And losing my wallet in Thailand also forced me to lose my passport card. And I ended up spending 2 weeks at the Indian consulate in Thailand, not able to call anyone, talk to anyone, with no money, no contacts at all, because I had lost my wallet. All of that, what does that have to do with the tape dispenser? Nothing, except for the fact that where I lost my wallet, there was a neon pink sign. Seeing this neon pink here reminds me of that. That's what I'm talking about here. How does that object connect with something unpleasant in the past that leads a character to feel scared when they see that object? Don't make it boring, right? If it's a cup, you can say, okay, well, I drank something that tasted bad in the past, and now I look at that cup, I feel sick. No, this is boring. Just like my backstory had these layers to it, see if you can also come up with something that has some layers to it like that. Challenging, but important. I see some people have their hand raised. I'm more than happy to take any questions. If anybody has a question, maybe somebody from Flame can facilitate the questions. Or not. I'm not sure if I can manage it here, but if somebody wants to do that, that would be so cool. So Anishka Singh, is there any way that you could ask your question so that I could hear it? Yes, but I know there's tons of questions in Q&A. Anishka, let's give it a try. Anishka, would you like to ask your question in the Q&A? For the last one, it didn't matter whether it was two social rules or two laws. Just it could be anything. It could be social or legal. Ashok B, question? Yes, I think yeah, it was two. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is that I want to know that for a character, is it important for a character to be like a person's best friend, as in with whom the person can connect with, and then maybe or someone who the person can actually look up to?
Well, so this is a really good question that you have, but it's kind of not one of the six that we're talking about. At the end of the whole session, at about 4:15, I'm going to answer other questions that are not related to these six, but that are important, and yours will be the first one that I answer. Okay?
Sure, thank you so much.
Okay, sure. Okay, so I hope everybody has that one. That little backstory behind this object. What's the connection with this object that leads to something unpleasant, that leads to this character being scared of this thing? Okay. Okay. No, of course not, Robbie. Yeah, you're supposed to pick any character that you can possibly imagine. You know, that's part of the fun of writing. All right, and now our sixth and final one. And after this, I'm going to explain to you why we did those various exercises. The last one is, what is something that you believe deep down inside? So we can call this something like a core belief, something that you believe. And now it's not necessary that everyone believes that thing, but it's something that you believe. I'll give you an example. Many people believe that family is the most important thing in the world. Nothing is more important than family. Not everyone believes that, but many people do believe that. We can call that a core belief. A core belief. So I don't want you to pick that one because I already gave that as an example. But what's something else that you believe deep down inside about the world? Okay, we call that a core belief. I believe if you work hard enough, you can make anything happen, right? This is a core belief. So I want you to really take a minute. Don't take the first thing that pops into your head. Take a minute, really think, what's something that I believe deep down inside, even though maybe not everyone believes this. Maybe this is unique to me, and me alone could be. What is something in my core belief system? Okay? Something that you believe, not something somebody else believes, something that you personally believe deep down inside, a core belief. It's really, really important that everybody write this down, and you'll see why in a second. Great. Everybody's doing great so far. Yes, but forgiveness and religion, these are too general. Like, I believe in religion as a core belief. No, this is way too general. This is not specific enough. That's like saying, you know, I believe that the world is nice. Like, okay, what do you mean by nice? Like, let's go a little bit deeper. We have to be specific. Some core belief. Get as specific as you can. Great. All the ones I've seen here are fine. Most importantly, I hope you're writing these down in your notebook. Now that everybody's done that, underneath that, in your notebook, I want you to write down what is the opposite of that. In other words, not everyone agrees with you about this core belief. Some people, in fact, think the opposite. What is it? Write it down. So if you wrote down, I believe that if I work hard enough, I can make my dreams come true. I want you to write down, I believe that if no matter how hard I work, sometimes my dreams won't come true. All right, what is the opposite of that? And I want you to write that down also. And we're going to talk about why you've written down two things and how this fits into what makes a great character. Maybe you wrote down, I believe that the universe is fundamentally a good place. Well, the opposite of that would be, I believe that the universe is fundamentally evil place or indifferent place, something like that, you know. Now, if you're saying to yourself, you might be saying to yourself, okay, all of this is fun and challenging, but what does it have to do with characters? What it has to do is that in order to understand a character, we have to understand deep down inside how they think and feel. And one of the things that I'm doing with you in these 6 exercises is I'm digging around inside, using your imagination to figure out how people behave under certain circumstances, what people think, what they really care about deep down inside, because those things are going to be really important when it comes time to designing characters for a story. So finish up. I'm going to give you 1 minute to finish up any of the exercises that you have left unfinished. And then after that 1 minute, I'm going to go back and explain to you what each exercise represented and how we can use those to build characters and stories. And then we'll finish by answering any questions that you might have about this exercise or about anything else having to do with storytelling and characters. Just take a minute to put the finishing touches on anything that you've done so far.
Professor, I'll just take 5 seconds. Students, it's a gentle reminder to all. It's mandatory to fill the feedback form, and the link is there in the chat section. Please fill it before the session ends.
Great. I'll give everybody some time at the end to do that
Yes.
before 4:30.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, so now let's kind of connect the dots here and explain what this has to do with building characters. The first thing that we have to ask before we go any further is a very fundamental question. Remember at the very beginning, I said to you, we're talking about storytelling here, right? There's many different types of writing. For example, if you're writing an essay, which is a support for a thesis, none of the stuff that we've talked about plays a role at all. None of it. A thesis and creating convincing and logical evidence has nothing to do with building characters. It's a whole different type of writing with its own priorities and its own rules. Here, we're talking about storytelling, okay? So we have to ask this one question: what is a story? Okay, what is a story? And I'm going to explain to you what a story is in 1 minute based on something that happened last week. So last week, I run this storytelling organization in Bombay. So every once in a while, somebody will interview me and they'll ask me questions like, what's a story or something like that. Well, this reporter asked me, in a story, what do you think is more important, the plot or the characters? Okay. And I said to her, I understand what you're asking, but there is a problem with the question. And here's what I meant by that. A story is when we have a character and over the course of that story, the character evolves. What is the term for that? When a character changes and evolves, we call that character development. Why does the character develop? Because of the things that are happening to her. Why is this important? Because the story is the development of that character. There is no story and then we take the character and we stick it into that story. That's not what a story is. A story is simply the evolution of a character. And why does she evolve? Because of various things that are happening to her. So the question is wrong, like what's more important, the characters or the plot? Well, the story is the character development. That's what it is. There is nothing else. All of the rest is really just details. So why am I saying that to you? Because when you are creating a story, you have to ask yourself, how is my character going to evolve? How is she going to change from the beginning of the story until the end? Well, there are 6 things. There are 6 ways that a character can evolve. And these are called the universal character attributes. Some of you wrote the word attributes when I asked you at the beginning, what makes a good character? You said attributes. Great, that's correct. But we've got to be more specific. There are 6 things that evolve. Sometimes only 2 of them evolve. Sometimes only 1 of them evolves. Sometimes all 6 evolve. But that's how we measure a story, by which of those factors, which of those attributes has evolved and changed from the beginning of the story until the end. So what are these 6 factors? These 6 factors are the reasons why we did those exercises. Okay, so let's look at the very first one. We had this character digging a hole, trying desperately to fill it. Then we also had this other character that you came up with who wanted something, was trying to do whatever they could to possibly get it. The universal character attribute that this represents is courage. Sometimes when somebody has something that they want, they just fold their arms and say, well, I want this, but I'll never actually end up getting this. So there's no point in me pursuing it. When a character pursues his dreams, that's called courage. And the bigger the goal is, the more courage it takes in order to get it. Now, we also notice something else, that sometimes you can be blinded by courage. Some of you were asking, like, can the character make bad decisions in order to get this thing? Absolutely. And when a character's decisions are so bad that they start to spiral out of control, we call that story a tragedy. That despite all of this character's effort, they have made too many mistakes, too many sacrifices along the way in order to get this thing, and their lives end up falling apart. We call that a tragedy. But even a tragedy involves courage. It's just that the decisions that were made were poor ones. So just to repeat, the first universal character attribute is courage. Every character, principal character in your story, in other words, main character, must have courage. Otherwise, they just hide in the corner and don't participate in the story. In order for the story to even move forward at all, there must be courage. So that's the first one, okay? Second one, I asked you, what is one dream that you have for yourself? What's one dream that you have that you want to be a part of, that you want to see, that you want to experience? The universal character attribute that this represents is ambition. You are not just aware of your dream, but you're drawn to it. You have this mysterious force that's pulling you towards it. If you see an opportunity to make that dream come true, you move in that direction. You don't just stay home and dream all day. You take small actions to actually make that thing come true. That's called ambition. A character must have ambition. A character must feel like where they are right now in life is not where they're destined to be. My life is bigger than it currently is. I think I'm capable of more. I think that together, society, everyone, we are capable of doing this. This is my dream. That's called ambition. I want to be bigger. I think we can be better. What is your character's ambition? That's the second universal character attribute. Okay, now here's a challenging one. I asked you to write down 3 talents that you don't have, and then I imagine you asking an all-knowing being, and the being told you that you actually do have those talents. The third, and this is a kind of an easy one for us, the third universal character attribute is talent. Over the course of a story, a character, your character, is going to realize that he has talents that he didn't even know he had. Many times, we all have talents that we're not aware of because we are under the impression that you're either born knowing something or not. Like you're either born with an ability or not. For example, some people tell me that I'm not a math person or something like that. And I'll say, what do you mean? They'll say, well, when I was little, I did poorly on one math test. And I say to them, that's one math test. That's hardly any evidence that you're not a math person. Maybe the reason that you don't have this talent is because you haven't practiced enough or you haven't needed to learn it. So in a story, talents is something that is going to be discover. Your character is going to discover and evolve, especially when it comes to unknown talents. It is very, very possible for both you and for your characters to have talents, but to perceive that they don't have talents. If you think about some of your favorite characters, sometimes, let's take a Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games. Yes, she thinks she has a little bit of talent when it comes to hunting with a bow, but little does she realize that she has world-class talent when it comes to archery. Only because of the Hunger Games experience did she realize the extent of her talent. Same is true in real life, same is true in our stories. Talents and discovery of talents is something that happens throughout the course of a story, making it the third universal character attribute. The fourth one, I asked you to think of 2 rules, and I asked you to think of situations where breaking those rules might be a good thing. This universal character attribute is called a virtue. Virtue. Now, a lot of people think virtue means doing good. It actually technically doesn't mean doing good. Virtue means being aware of what is good, but also being aware of the fact that sometimes, even though you know what is good, you do something else. So remember we said in that exercise, like, can you imagine a situation where it would be okay to drive beyond the speed limit? Correct. Why is this important for characters? Because our characters will believe something is right or wrong at the beginning of a story. Later on, at the end of the story, they might find out that actually things aren't as black and white as they thought. Maybe under certain circumstances, it is actually okay to do this thing that was once forbidden. Or maybe actually this thing was permitted, and then we find out later that it should not be permitted. So your sense of right and wrong also evolves over the course of a story. We call that virtue. So remember, the ones that we've done so far, this idea of courage, ambition, talent, virtue, they are changing throughout the story. They start one way, and then the character's use of them, perception of them, changes as the story moves forward. These are the things that develop. When I say to you, in a story, your character should develop, yes, that sounds very nice, but what do I mean by that? Develop how? Develop like this. Certain circumstances arise where a character thinks that one thing is good, only to find out that maybe that thing isn't so good after all. Or maybe something is forbidden, only to find out here's a situation where we have to actually break that rule in order to have something good happen. Okay, that's called virtue. The fifth one was this one that required you to write this backstory, right? Some object, some small object that's totally normal, that we see every day maybe, but there's some backstory behind it that sends this sense of being scared right through your character. They associate this object with something from the past. There is a very simple term for this, and this is our fifth universal character attribute, which is fear. Our characters should be afraid of something at the beginning of the story, and during the story, they will confront that fear. Now, sometimes this fear is so terrifying that it consumes them. The fear wins. Again, tragedy. The fear is more powerful than the character. But sometimes the fear is confronted, and a new way of living is available now to the character because they have confronted that fear. Now, one thing to keep in mind about fear is that characters very rarely will say, okay, I'm going to conquer that fear now. That's not how fear works. Fear requires circumstances that force the character to confront that fear. So imagine that you're reading a children's book about a cat. And this cat is one of the bravest cats in the world. But for some reason, this mama cat is just terrified of water. If it's raining, she will run away. If there's a shower, she will run in the other room. She's brave when it comes to everything, but when it comes to water, she can't deal with it. Well, at the beginning of the story, one of her little kittens is going to be kidnapped. The mean cat living next door is going to kidnap her kitten and bring it to where he lives, which is on an island in the middle of the lake. So we can see this coming a mile ahead. At the climax of the story, this mama cat is going to have to swim through the lake in order to get to her kitten. In other words, the circumstances of the story force her to confront her fears. So fear is the fifth universal character attribute, because what that character is afraid of at the beginning of the story is going to be different than what they're afraid of at the end of the story. If the fear wins, we call that a tragedy. If the fear is overcome, we call that character development. That might, in fact, bring the character closer to their goal. And the sixth and final universal character attribute has to do with when I asked you, what is something you believe deep down inside? We call that a core belief, something I believe deep down inside. Then I asked you, after you wrote that down, to imagine the opposite. This happens all the time in a story, that a character will start out believing one of those and end up believing the opposite. So just like the two opposites that you have in front of you, they're not just like static, frozen. In a story, one is moving to the other one. Okay, so those are the two ends of the story, beginning and end. Worldview is what this is called, a worldview. So worldview is another word for core belief. The worldview of a character is going to change from the beginning of the story until the end. They're going to start with a belief that they believe deep down inside, in their heart of hearts. I fundamentally believe this. This is absolutely correct. I believe that family is not important. Family, people in the family are just like anybody else. But by the end of the story, I've come to believe that there is nothing more important in my life than family. The complete opposite. We call that worldview transformation. And that is the sixth and final universal character attribute. So just to review those: courage, ambition, talent, virtue, fear, and worldview. These are the things that are changing. When we say this character develops, we mean this character evolves. When we say this character evolves, we mean this character changes. Nice to say the character should change, but what exactly is changing? These six things. Sometimes there are no talents that are discovered. In fact, the worldview is changing. Great. As long as one of these is changing, we have character development, which of course means we have a story. If none of these are changing, we have no development, therefore we have no story, because a story is the development of the character. So these are some very, very high level things, but yeah, I know this group is very sharp, and that's why I decided to present these things to you today. Talk about what makes a great character in a story, what makes an unforgettable character that you love, recognizing that these six attributes are the gears, are the levers that are going to change before the end of the story. So now that we have 10 more minutes, I want you to ask any questions that you have about characters, regardless of whether it has anything to do with what we talked about today. I'm going to answer that one question that Anashika asked, which was a really good one. Should a character have a best friend or what we call a companion? Not necessarily. A character doesn't need a best friend in a story, but one of the reasons why a friend is very good is because if a story is going well, in other words, if a story is correctly designed, correctly written, then there should be a struggle for the character to get the thing that they want. If they don't get the thing that they want at the end, we call that a tragedy. If they do get it, it's not a tragedy. Right? So in that struggle, sometimes a character will reach moments of discouragement where they feel like they don't want to go on. We call those obstacles. I move forward only to find out that this is not working. I move forward only to find out that I took 2 steps back. Every time the character tries a solution, we find out that this doesn't work. Just like the Harry Potter series. I'm a big fan of the Harry Potter series. When they try to solve a problem, they end up finding there's 3 more problems came out of that problem. Well, it's really useful for Harry to have friends who he can rely on in those moments of feeling discouraged. Does he need them? No. Does it actually make the story more interesting? In that case, I think yes. Okay. Any more questions? No, Aditya, of being, virtue does not mean being good. It means recognizing the difference between good and bad, even though sometimes we know that you have to break the rules in order to be good. That's what virtue means, in the sense that we're talking about it here. Any other questions? I'm just going to go to the Q&A and just answer the ones that I see here. How to improve your poetry? This one is really easy. How to improve any type of writing that you do is you must read. You must read for at least 10 minutes a day. If you want to be a poet, you must read poetry. If you want to be a story writer, you must read stories. Many students think that they can write without reading. This is incorrect. It's like saying, I want to be a professional basketball player, but I don't want to practice basketball or watch basketball. Not possible, right? They go hand in hand. So if you want to be better at writing, you must begin reading. Somebody wrote, can a story progress without an antagonist? Yes, we don't, and in my workshops, in my classes, we don't even use the word antagonist. We use the word, the term antagonistic force, because the antagonist can also be inside a character. Doesn't have to be another character, like a villain versus a hero. Sometimes the antagonist is actually just a different version of the character herself. So we call that an internal conflict. Well, Natasha, that's exactly what we've been doing today. How do you keep the readers stuck to a story, curious about what's going to happen? You give the character these changes, these moral dilemmas that force them to develop. A character doesn't develop for fun. And this kind of goes back to that question that the reporter asked me, what's more important, the plot or the character? The character is the story, but the reason the character develops is because of those things that are happening to her. So what keeps a reader stuck to the story is, ooh, this thing happened. How is our character going to react, adapt, and overcome? How's it going to happen? Is it going to happen? Or is this thing that happens to her going to be so overwhelming that she'll give up? Another question here. Yes, I mean, obviously we move, most characters in writing and in movies and things like that move from a smaller version of themselves to a bolder version of themselves. Shy moves to confident. Powerless moves to powerful. We see this quite often in storytelling, absolutely. It can also work in the other way. We call that the dark inversion, a little bit more advanced for this workshop. But basically, for the most part, we have a smaller version of a character moving to a more capable one at the end. Nanki asks, how does the belief system evolve? Well, the belief system evolves based on the things that happen in the story. So like the example that I gave you before was, I don't believe that family is important. That's my character. And during the story, this character finds out that all of her so-called friends and support systems abandon her when she needs them the most. The only people that are there for her are her family. So by the end of the story, she believes that family is the most important thing. Without my family, I never would have survived this. So I've gone from believing this at the beginning to now believing this other thing because of what happened to me during the story. That's how your worldview evolves. So I promised I would leave 5 minutes at the end for you to fill out the evaluation form, which is required. And obviously there's some notes that you've taken that are going to be required as part of your certificate as per this training. So thank you so much for letting me spend some time with you. If you enjoyed this, remember that these are the types of things that we do at Flame every day. These are the types of activities and debates and writing that we do in our classes. So whether you come to Flame or go somewhere else, I hope you explore this side of your creativity and you have a chance to make your stories even better through unforgettable characters.
Thank you so much, Professor Burns. It was definitely a very enriching session, and I'm sure students have, have a lot to take back. And thank you, students, for attending the session. The next session will be on personal branding, which will be taken by Professor Frederick Hurst, who is a doctorate degree holder in marketing management from University of Pretoria, South Africa. Okay, it was great to have you all here. And I hope you all have a lot to take back. Thank you so much, Professor Michael Burns, again for such a wonderful session. And see you all in the next session then. Thank you.